The cargo freighter Starbound Horizon moved slowly through the darkness of space, far from Earth and far from any help. The ship was old and tired, its metal walls showing the marks of 20 years of hard work. It was not a warship. It was not fast or powerful. It was just a simple cargo hauler, carrying supplies to a distant human colony. Captain Daniel Morgan stood near the large window on the bridge.
Ow!
He was 52 years old, with gray hair and deep lines on his face from years of worry and hard decisions. He had been a spacer for most of his life, hauling cargo from one end of human space to the other. It was not exciting work, but it was honest work, and he was proud of it. His crew numbered 43 souls. They were not soldiers or fighters. They were engineers and doctors, cargo handlers and navigators. Good people who had signed up for a simple job, delivering medical supplies and farming equipment to the struggling colony on a planet called New Haven. None of them had ever fired a weapon in anger. None of them had ever faced real danger in the black void between stars that was about to change. Lisa Grant sat at the communications station, her fingers moving over the controls as she monitored the usual space chatter. She was young, only 28, with short brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When the sensors showed 3 unknown objects approaching the ship, she was the first to notice. "Captain," she said, her voice calm but serious, "we have company. 3 ships coming toward us from the left side. They don't match anything in our database." Daniel walked over to her station and looked at the screen. The 3 shapes were unlike any human vessel he had ever seen. They were smooth and dark, almost black, shaped like curved blades cutting through space. They moved together with perfect timing, like predators hunting prey. "Try to contact them," Daniel ordered. "Use the standard greeting protocols." Lisa nodded and began sending messages on all frequencies. She tried human languages first, then switched to mathematical patterns that any intelligent species should understand. The universal greeting that Earth had prepared for this very moment. The moment when humanity finally met someone else in the vast universe. The response came not in words but in fire. A beam of bright blue energy shot across the front of the horizon, close enough to shake the entire ship. Warning lights flashed red across every station. Crew members grabbed onto railings and chairs to keep from falling. "That was a warning shot," said Kevin Palmer, the chief engineer. He was a big man with thick arms and a bald head, and he had seen enough trouble in his 60 years to know what danger looked like. "They want us to stop moving." Daniel's hands tightened into fists at his sides. He had no weapons to fight back with. He had no speed to run away. All he had was his crew and his wits. "All stop," he commanded. "Cut the engines. Let's see what they want." The horizon slowed and then stopped, hanging in space like a fish caught in a net. The 3 alien ships moved closer, surrounding the freighter on all sides. Their weapons stayed pointed at the human vessel, ready to fire if anyone tried anything foolish. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then the sensors detected something new. A group of life forms had appeared in the main cargo bay, transported directly through the horizon's hull by technology humans could not understand. "They're boarding us," Lisa said, her voice shaking slightly for the first time. Daniel took a deep breath. "All crew, stay calm. Do not resist. Let's find out what we're dealing with." He led a small group down to the cargo bay, where they got their first look at the beings who had captured them. The aliens were tall, standing nearly 7 feet high. They had hard outer shells like insects, colored in shades of dark green and brown. Their heads held large eyes made of many smaller parts, and their mouths clicked and chittered as they communicated with each other. There were 20 of them, each carrying a weapon that glowed with the same blue energy that had nearly hit the ship. They moved with confidence, spreading out through the cargo bay as if they owned it. As if they had done this many times before, one of the aliens stepped forward. It was slightly larger than the others, and it wore a band of gold around one of its arms. The leader, Daniel guessed. It made a series of clicking sounds, and a small device on its chest translated the words into rough English. "You are now property of the Vethkai Dominion," the device said in a flat, mechanical voice. "This vessel and its cargo are claimed by right of conquest. Your crew will be taken for processing. Resistance means death. Daniel felt cold anger rising in his chest, but he kept his face calm. We are peaceful traders. We carry medicine and food for our colony. We mean no harm to anyone, as the alien leader, whom the crew would later call Clicks because of the sounds it made, tilted its head in what might have been amusement. Your intentions do not matter. Your weakness is what matters. You have no weapons. You have no strength. You are prey. The Vethkai soldiers began herding the human crew toward the mess hall, pushing them with the ends of their weapons. Some of the crew members cried. Others walked in shocked silence, unable to believe what was happening. A few looked angry, their hands shaking with the urge to fight back, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. There was nothing they could do. As Daniel walked with his people, he watched the aliens carefully. He noticed how they moved, how they held their weapons, how they looked at the humans with complete contempt. To them, humans were nothing but cargo, weak creatures to be used and thrown away. But Daniel also noticed something else. He saw the way Maria Santos, his cargo specialist, studied the guards with cold, calculating eyes. Maria had grown up poor and desperate in the rough streets of New Snow Paulo. She had fought for everything she had, and she was not afraid of anyone or anything. He saw Benjamin Cole, the ship's doctor, keeping track of the aliens' movements, counting them, measuring their strengths and weaknesses. Ben had been a military medic once, long ago, and he had seen combat that left scars on his soul. He saw young Tyler Brooks, the navigator, slowly losing his fear as something harder took its place. Tyler was young and untested, but he had the same stubborn fire that burned in all humans. The Vethkai thought they had captured helpless prey. They had conquered other species before, beings who gave up when faced with superior power. They expected humans to do the same. They did not know human history. They did not know about the wars and struggles and endless fighting that had shaped humanity into what it was. They did not know that humans had clawed their way to the top of their food chain by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than anything else on their world. They did not know that they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. As Daniel was pushed into the mess hall with the rest of his crew, he caught Maria's eye and gave her the smallest possible nod. She nodded back, understanding passing between them without words. The Vethkai thought this was over, for the humans. It was just beginning. The mess hall of the starbound horizon had never felt so small. 43 humans sat crowded together on the floor, watched by 4 Vethkai guards who stood at each corner of the room. The aliens held their weapons ready, their many-eyed heads turning slowly to watch every movement the humans made. For the first day, most of the crew sat in stunned silence. Some whispered prayers. Others held each other and cried softly. The reality of their situation was almost too horrible to accept. They had been captured by aliens. They were going to be taken to some unknown place and used as slaves. Those who were not useful would be killed. But as the hours passed, something began to change. The Vethkai commander, the one the crew called Clicks, visited them on the second day. Through the translation device, it explained what would happen next. The humans would be taken to a processing center, where their skills and strength would be tested. Those who could work would be sent to labor camps. Those who were too old, too sick, or too weak would be eliminated. This was the way of the Dominion. This was the natural order of things. The strong ruled and the weak served or died. The aliens spoke these words as if they were simple facts, like describing the weather or the color of the sky. There was no cruelty in its voice, no pleasure in causing fear. To the Vethkai, humans were simply resources to be used, nothing more. When Clicks left, Daniel looked around at his crew. He saw the fear in their eyes, but he also saw something else growing beneath it, a spark of defiance, a refusal to accept this fate. He moved slowly through the crowd, speaking quietly to certain crew members. Maria Santos, Kevin Palmer, Benjamin Cole, Tyler Brooks. Others who he knew had strength and courage hidden inside them. One by one, he gathered them into a small group in the corner of the room, speaking in whispers too soft for the guards to hear. "We need to learn everything we can about these things," Daniel said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "How they move, when they sleep, Where they keep their weapons. Every detail matters. Maria nodded, her dark eyes never leaving the nearest guard. They change shifts every 6 hours. There are always 4 in here, but only 12 on the whole ship. The rest are on their own vessels. 12, Kevin repeated thoughtfully. He was old, but his mind was still sharp. That's not many. They must be very confident. They've done this before, said Amanda Price, the ship's CH. Imist. She was a quiet woman with gentle features, but her voice was hard. They've conquered other species. Beings who probably gave up as soon as they were captured. They think we'll do the same. Benjamin Cole shook his head slowly. They don't understand what we are. Look at them, he nodded, toward the guards. They stand out in the open. They don't watch the ceiling or the floor. They don't check the corners. They've never had to fight in close quarters before. Tyler Brooks leaned forward, his young face tight with concentration. I've been watching their patrol patterns. They follow the same routes at the same times. Like machines. They don't change anything because they don't expect us to do anything. Daniel felt a grim smile pulling at his lips. The Vethkai were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They had conquered too easily and too often. They had forgotten that prey could become predators if pushed hard enough. What about their armor? He asked. Maria answered. It's tough, like the shell of a crab or a beetle. But I saw one of them bump against a doorframe earlier. It pulled back fast, like it hurt. The joints between the plates might be weak spots, and their eyes are big and exposed. Diego Reyes, a cargo handler with arms like tree trunks, cracked his knuckles quietly. Give me something sharp and 10 seconds with one of them. I'll find the weak spots. We need to be smart about this, Daniel warned. If we move too soon, they'll call for help from those ships outside. We need to take them all at once, fast and quiet, before they know what's happening. Over the next 2 days, the crew prepared in secret. They gathered information, watching the guards and learning their habits. They collected anything that could be used as a weapon. Kitchen knives smuggled from the galley, heavy tools hidden in pockets, lengths of wire and strips of cloth that could be used to choke or blind. Kevin spent hours studying the ship's systems in his mind, remembering every wire and circuit and maintenance tunnel. The Vethkai had disabled the communications and navigation, but they had left the basic systems running. They needed the humans alive for now, which meant they needed air and gravity and light. But Kevin knew something the aliens didn't. He knew how to control those systems from access points hidden throughout the ship. And he knew that the Vethkai, with their compound eyes designed for the bright light of their home world, could not see in darkness the way humans could. The plan came together piece by piece. It was dangerous. It was probably foolish. The odds were against them in every way. But these were humans. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them in 1,000 different ways. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed everything. They had learned to fight not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to give up, ever. On the evening of the 4th day, Daniel gathered his key people one last time. They sat in a tight circle, their faces lit only by the dim emergency lights that the Vethkai had left running. Tomorrow night, Daniel said quietly. We move at 0300 when their guard shifts are changing. Kevin will kill the lights on deck 3 first. Maria and Diego will take the guards in engineering. Ben will create a distraction in the mess hall while the rest of us handle the guards here. Tyler will lead teams through the maintenance tunnels to catch anyone we miss. He looked at each of them in turn. These were not soldiers. They were ordinary people who had never asked to be in this situation. But they had chosen to fight anyway, because that was what humans did. If this goes wrong, we all die, Daniel said honestly. But if we do nothing, we die anyway, just slower and after a lot more suffering. I'd rather go down fighting. Maria Santos smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had survived things that would break most people. They think we're weak because we don't have armor or claws or big weapons. They're about to learn what humans can do with nothing but our hands and our anger. The group split up, returning to their places among the other crew members. In 1s and 2s, they passed the word. Be ready. Tomorrow night. The uprising, as the ship's lights dimmed for the artificial night cycle, 43 humans closed their eyes and pretended to sleep. But their hearts were racing. Their hands were tight around hidden weapons. The Vethkai guards stood at their posts, bored and comfortable. They had done this so many times before. Captured ships, broken spirits, delivered cargo. Just another routine mission. They had no idea that they were sleeping in a room full of predators who were about to wake up hungry. The clock on the wall showed 2:55 when Daniel Morgan opened his eyes. Around him, the mess hall was quiet. Most of the crew appeared to be sleeping, their bodies curled up on the hard floor. The 4 Vethkai guards stood at their usual positions, their weapons held loosely. Their attention wandering after hours of watching nothing happen. Daniel's heart was beating hard in his chest. But he kept his breathing slow and steady. 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, everything would change. They would either win their freedom or die trying. There was no middle ground. He caught Maria Santos looking at him from across the room. She gave the smallest nod, her hand resting on something hidden under her jacket. Near the door, Diego Reyes shifted his weight slightly, his massive frame tensed and ready. By the wall, Benjamin Cole had positioned himself close to one of the guards. Looking small and harmless, just another frightened prisoner, the minutes crawled by like hours. Then, at exactly 0300, the lights on Deck 3 went out. The effect was immediate. Emergency alarms began beeping somewhere in the distance. 2 of the guards in the mess hall clicked rapidly at each other, their heads turning toward the door. This was unexpected. This was wrong. Something had gone against the routine, and the Vethkai did not like things that went against routine. One of the guards spoke into communication device on its arm. Trying to contact the soldiers on Deck 3, there was no response. Just static and silence. The guard clicked something to its companions, and 2 of them moved toward the door, weapons raised. They were going to investigate. They were going to find out what had happened to their friends. They never made it. Benjamin Cole moved first. He had been standing close to the nearest guard, looking like he was half asleep on his feet. When the guard turned its attention toward the door, Ben struck with a speed that surprised even his friends. The thin wire he had hidden in his sleeve was around the guard's neck before the alien could react. Ben pulled hard, twisting his body and using all his weight to drag the creature off balance. The Vethkai were strong, but they had never been attacked like this before. The guard clawed at the wire, its clicks becoming high-pitched screams. But Ben held on with the grip of a man who had once held dying soldiers together on battlefields. Across the room, Maria Santos was already moving. She had taken a kitchen knife from the galley 2 days ago, hiding it in her boot. Now, she drove it into the gap between the armor plates on the second guard's side. Right where she had seen them flinch earlier. The blade went deep, and the alien made a horrible sound as it fell. Diego Reyes did not bother with weapons. He simply grabbed the third guard and lifted it off its feet. The Vethkai were tall, but Diego was stronger than any creature they had conquered before. He slammed the alien into the wall with enough force to crack its armor, then did it again and again, until the creature stopped moving. The fourth guard finally understood what was happening. It raised its weapon and fired, the blue energy beam cutting a line of fire across the ceiling. Crew members screamed and dove for cover. But before the guard could aim at anyone, Tyler Brooks was on it. The young navigator had been hiding near the door, waiting for this moment. He threw himself at the guard's legs, knocking it off balance. As it fell, 3 other crew members piled on top of it, their hands grabbing for the weapon, their fists and elbows and knees striking any part they could reach. In less than 30 seconds, all 4 guards were down. Daniel looked around the mess hall, his pulse pounding in his ears. Some of his crew were injured, with burns and cuts from the brief fight. But they were alive. They were free. No time to rest, he said quickly. We need to move. There are 8 more on the ship. The crew split into teams as planned. Maria led a group toward engineering where Kevin Palmer was already waiting with more fighters. Tyler took 3 people into the maintenance tunnels, moving toward the bridge. Daniel led the rest toward the cargo bay, where the remaining guards were probably gathering after losing contact with their friends. In engineering, Kevin had done his work well. The darkness on Deck 3 was complete, so black that even the emergency lights had been disabled. The two guards who had come to investigate were stumbling blindly, their compound eyes unable to adjust to the total absence of light, but human eyes could adjust. Slowly, over millions of years of evolution, humans had learned to see in the darkness. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to find their enemies. Enough to strike. Maria and her team moved through the darkness like ghosts. The guards never saw them coming. They only felt the hands that grabbed them, the weapons that were taken from them, the blows that came from every direction at once. In the maintenance tunnels, Tyler and his team crawled through the narrow passages that ran behind the walls. The Vethkai did not know these tunnels existed. They had never thought to look for them. Why would they? No species they had conquered before had ever tried to use the ship itself as a weapon. Tyler's team emerged behind two guards who were moving toward the mess hall, responding to the distress calls that had gone unanswered. The guards died before they could even turn around. On the bridge, the last two guards had sealed the door and were trying to send a message to the ships outside. They were clicking rapidly into the communication system, reporting that something had gone wrong, that the humans were fighting back, that they needed help. But Lisa Grant had spent the last 3 days studying the communication systems. She had learned where the signals went and how to block them. From her hiding place, she had cut the connections one by one. The guards were shouting into dead equipment. When Daniel's team reached the bridge, they found the two guards trapped inside, their weapons pointed at the sealed door. The Vethkai were finally afraid. They could hear the sounds of fighting from other parts of the ship. They could hear the silence of their friends who no longer answered calls. "This is your only chance," Daniel called through the door. "Surrender now, and you will live. Fight, and you will die like the others." The guards did not surrender. They opened the door and came out firing, their weapons blazing blue death in every direction. 2 humans fell, their bodies burned by the energy beams. But the others did not run. They charged forward into the fire, using the bodies of their fallen friends as shields. They reached the guards and dragged them down through sheer weight of numbers. Fists and feet and improvised weapons struck until the clicking stopped. Daniel stood over the last fallen guard, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. His clothes were torn and stained. Around him, his crew looked the same, battered and bloody but alive. "Status report," he said, his voice rough. Lisa Grant checked the ship's systems from the bridge console. "All 12 guards are down, 10 dead, 2 captured. We have control of the ship." A cheer went up from the crew, ragged and exhausted but real. They had done it. 43 civilians had defeated a force of 12 alien soldiers, to nothing but kitchen knives and wire in their own bare hands. But Daniel did not join the celebration. He was looking out the window at the 3 alien warships still floating in space around them. Each one carried more than 100 soldiers. Each one had weapons that could destroy the horizon in seconds. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Not even close." The crew fell silent, following his gaze to the dark shapes waiting outside. The real fight was just beginning. The 3 Vethkai warships hung in the darkness of space, like patient predators waiting for their prey to tire itself out. Each ship was 10 times the size of the starbound horizon, carrying crews of over 100 soldiers and weapons powerful enough to crack a planet's crust. Against such force, the human freighter was less than nothing. A bug to be crushed whenever the aliens decided to stop playing. Daniel Morgan stood on the bridge of his recaptured ship, studying the enemy vessels on the main screen. His crew had won an impossible victory, but they all knew it was temporary. The Vethkai ships had not attacked yet, probably because they wanted to understand what had happened first. But once they realized that their boarding party was dead, they would come with overwhelming force. "How long do you think we have?" Tyler Brooks asked from the navigation station. "A few hours, maybe less," Daniel replied. "They'll try to contact their soldiers first. When they get no response, they'll send another team. When that team doesn't come back either, they'll just destroy us from a distance, and we need to hit them before that happens," said Maria Santos. Her arm was bandaged from a cut she had received during the fight, but her eyes were just as fierce as ever. "We can't run, can't hide. Our only chance is to attack." Kevin Palmer shook his head slowly. "Attack with what? We have no weapons. The only guns we have are the ones we took from the guards, and those are just small arms." Can't punch through the hull of a warship with handheld weapons. The bridge fell into discouraged silence. They had come so far, but it seemed like they had reached the end of the road. All that fighting, all that courage, and it would end with their ship being blown apart by enemies they could not even touch. Then Amanda Price spoke up. The quiet chemist had been standing in the back, thinking while the others talked. Now she stepped forward with a strange light in her eyes. "We might not have weapons," she said, "but we have cargo." "Do you know what's in our hold right now?" Daniel frowned, trying to remember. Medical supplies, farming equipment, terraforming chemicals. Exactly. Amanda's voice grew stronger. Terraforming chemicals, including large amounts of iron oxide and aluminum powder. Separately, they're harmless. But if you mix them in the right proportions, you get thermite. And thermite burns at over 2,000 degrees. Kevin's eyes widened as he understood. Hot enough to melt through armor plating. It's hot enough to cut through a hull. But how do we get it close to their ships? Tyler asked. If we try to fly over there, they'll shoot us down before we get halfway. Lisa Grant turned from her communication station. The cargo drones. We have 12 of them, designed for transferring supplies between ships in space. They're small, slow, and they look exactly like floating debris. If we program them right, we could send them toward the enemy ships without triggering any alarms. The plan came together quickly after that. Kevin and Amanda worked in the cargo bay, mixing the chemicals with careful precision. One wrong move, one spark in the wrong place, and the whole ship would go up in flames. But their hands were steady and their minds were focused. Lisa reprogrammed the cargo drones, changing their flight patterns to make them look like random pieces of space junk drifting on solar winds. Each drone would carry enough thermite to burn through several feet of metal. They hit the right spots, like engine rooms or shield generators. They could cripple an entire warship. While the technical work continued, Tyler spent his time studying the enemy. During the boarding, the crew had captured data devices from the Vethkai guards. Most of the information was encrypted, but some of it was accessible, including technical details about how their ships worked. "I found something interesting," Tyler reported to Daniel. "After hours of searching, their shields have a flaw. Every time they prepare to jump too faster than light speed, there's a moment, about a third of a second. When the shields drop completely, it's a power regulation thing, moving energy from shields to engines." Daniel leaned forward. "Can you predict when they'll try to jump? If they follow their standard procedures, yes. And I think I can trigger a false jump command using the captured communication equipment. Make them think their own ship is telling them to prepare for departure." It was a desperate plan with 100 things that could go wrong, but it was the only plan they had. At 0300 the next morning, the attack began. 12 cargo drones floated. Away from the starbound horizon, their movements slow and random like debris scattered from a damaged ship. The Vethkai sensors detected them, but classified them as junk, not worth worrying about. The aliens were focused on the human vessel, waiting for it to try something obvious like running or fighting. They never imagined an attack could come from something so small and harmless. The first warship died quickly. 3 drones attached themselves to the hull near the engine section, their magnetic clamps holding them in place. The thermite ignited silently in the vacuum of space, burning white-hot through the armor plating. In seconds, the fire reached the ship's reactor. The explosion was bright enough to light up the darkness for miles in every direction. The second warship reacted. Immediately, its shields went up, its weapons came online, and its commander began shouting orders. But the drones had already attached themselves before the shields activated. When they exploded, they took out the shield generators and left the ship drifting. Dark and powerless, its crew trapped inside a metal coffin. The third warship tried to escape. Its captain was smarter than the others, realizing that something terrible was happening, and deciding to flee rather than fight an enemy he did not understand. The ship turned away from the carnage and began charging its faster-than-light engines. That was exactly what Tyler had been waiting for, using the captured Vethkai equipment. He sent a signal to the ship's systems, triggering the shield drop a fraction of a second early. The remaining drones, which had been following the vessel, at a distance accelerated toward the gap in the defenses. The explosions tore through the ship's midsection, breaking it into 3 pieces that spun away into the darkness. There were no survivors. On the bridge of the starbound horizon, human crew stood in shocked silence, staring at the destruction they had caused. 3 warships, each carrying more than 100 enemy soldiers, reduced to burning wreckage by a cargo freighter with no weapons at all. Kevin Palmer was the first to speak. "Did we really just do that?" "Yeah," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, we did." Daniel Morgan felt no joy, no triumph. He felt only a cold, tired relief that his people were still alive. The enemy was destroyed, but he knew this was not the end. The Vethkai Dominion would send more ships when these ones did not return. They would want revenge. But for now, his crew was safe. For now, they had one. "Lisa," he said quietly, "get the communication system working. We need to send a message to Earth. They need to know what's out here." Lisa nodded and began working at her station. As her fingers moved over the controls, the first signals and days began traveling out from the battered freighter, carrying news that would change humanity's understanding of the universe forever. They were not alone. And their neighbors were not friendly, but humanity would be ready. They always found a way to be ready. The celebration on the starbound horizon lasted less than an hour. The crew had barely finished treating their wounds and counting their dead when the sensors lit up with new contacts. Lisa Grant's face went pale as she read the data on her screen. "Captain," she said, her voice hollow with disbelief, "we have incoming ships. A lot of them." Daniel Morgan moved to her station and looked at the numbers. 30 warships, each one as big as the vessels they had just destroyed, were approaching from deep space. They were moving fast, and they would arrive in less than 4 hours. The brief moment of hope that had filled the bridge vanished like smoke in the wind. "It's a fleet," Tyler Brooks said quietly. "They must have been nearby when we attacked. Close enough to detect the explosions and come investigate." Maria Santos gripped the edge of her console hard enough to turn her knuckles white. "So we killed 3 ships, and now 30 more are coming. That's not exactly a winning trade." The crew looked at each other with the exhausted despair of people who had given everything they had and found it was not enough. They had fought so hard. They had been so clever, and none of it mattered against a force this size. But Daniel Morgan was not ready to give up. He had been a spacer for 30 years. He had learned long ago that there was always something you could do, even when everything seemed hopeless. You might not be able to win, but you could still make your enemy pay for every inch of ground they took. "Lisa, is the communication array working?" he asked. "Yes, sir. The message to Earth is already on its way." Could then send another message. This time, broadcasted on all Vethkai frequencies. "I want to talk to whoever is commanding that fleet." Lisa hesitated. "Sir, are you sure? If we draw their attention, they might attack sooner. They're going to attack anyway. The only question is whether we face them in silence or make them listen first." The crew watched as Lisa worked the controls, sending out a signal that would reach the approaching fleet. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then the main screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was a Vethkai, larger and older than any they had seen before. Its shell was scarred from old battles, and its compound eyes had the cold patience of a predator who had never known defeat. When it spoke, the translation device rendered its words in a deep, commanding voice. "I am Fleet Commander Zethrak of the Vethkai Dominion. You have destroyed 3 of our vessels and killed many of our soldiers. Surrender now, and I will grant you a quick death. Resist, and your suffering will last for generations." Daniel stood straight and faced the screen. He was tired, dirty, and injured from the fighting. His ship was damaged, and his crew was battered. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "This is Captain Daniel Morgan of the Starbound Horizon. We are a cargo vessel of the United Earth Coalition. You attacked us without warning, invaded our ship, and threatened to enslave our people. We defended ourselves. If that makes us your enemy, then so be it." Zethrak made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. "Defended yourselves? You are 40 primitive beings in a broken ship. You have no weapons, no fleet, no army. You are nothing. We are human, Daniel replied simply. And you are about to learn what that means. He nodded to Lisa, who activated a data transmission. On the Vethkai ships, screens began displaying recorded footage from the Starbound Horizon security cameras. The aliens watched as their soldiers were overwhelmed by unarmed prisoners. They watched as 3 warships exploded from attacks they never saw coming. They watched as a species they had dismissed as weak and helpless destroyed everything they sent against them. When the footage ended, Daniel spoke again. That was 43 people. Not soldiers. Not warriors. Just ordinary humans, cargo haulers, and doctors and engineers who decided they would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Imagine what our military will do when they arrive, Zethrek's compound eyes were fixed on the screen. For the first time since the conversation began, he said nothing. Right now, Daniel continued, a message is traveling toward Earth at faster than light speed. It contains everything we learned about your species, your technology, and your empire. In a few hours, the entire human race will know you exist. And when our warships come, and they will come, they will be looking for answers. He stepped closer to the screen, his eyes hard and cold. They will find the wreckage of your patrol ships. They will analyze your weapons and shields. They will track your communications back to your home worlds. And then they will come for you. The fleet commander finally responded, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that had not been there before. You are bluffing. Your species has never left your own star system in significant numbers. You pose no threat to the Dominion. We split the atom before we reached our moon, Daniel said. We fought 2 wars that killed nearly 100 million of our own kind. We have weapons that can sterilize entire planets. We survived ice ages, plagues, and famines that would have wiped out any other species. We do not break. We do not surrender. And we do not forget. He paused, letting the words sink in. You can destroy this ship. You can kill everyone on board. It won't matter. The message is already sent. Humanity knows about you now, and humanity does not forgive those who threaten its children. The transmission cut off as Daniel gestured for Lisa to end it. The bridge was silent as everyone waited to see what would happen next. The alien fleet was still approaching. 30 warships against 1 damaged freighter. There was no way to win this fight. But then, slowly, something changed on the sensor display. Tyler frowned at his console, checked his readings twice, and then looked up with an expression of pure amazement. They're turning around, he said. The whole fleet. They're changing course, heading back the way they came. Maria leaned over his shoulder to see for herself. All 30 ships? Every single one. On the main screen, the distant lights of the Vethkai fleet grew smaller and smaller as they retreated into the darkness of space. Fleet Commander Zethrak had looked at the footage. He had heard the warning, and he had decided that this was not a fight worth having, not today. Maybe not ever. Daniel Morgan sank into the captain's chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 52 years. Around him, his crew began to react, first with disbelief, then with growing joy. They hugged each other. They laughed. Some of them cried. They had survived. Lisa Grant turned to Daniel with tears running down her cheeks. Sir, the message to Earth. The Coalition Navy is responding. They're sending ships to our location. Help is coming. Daniel nodded, but his thoughts were already looking beyond this moment. The Vethkai were retreating today, but they would remember what had happened here. So would every other species in this part of the galaxy. Word would spread about the soft-looking creatures who had destroyed warships with cargo drones and improvised chemicals, who had fought back when they should have surrendered, who had refused to die quietly. Humanity had announced itself to the universe in fire and blood. It was not the peaceful first contact that anyone had hoped for, but it was honest. It showed the cosmos exactly what kind of species was rising from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. A species that would not be conquered. A species that would not be enslaved. A species that would fight to the last breath and beyond for the right to exist on its own terms as the starbound horizon limped toward home. Surrounded by the wreckage of its enemies and carrying the scars of its impossible victory, Daniel Morgan allowed himself a small smile. The universe had just gotten a lot more interesting, and humanity was just getting started.